Hi guys, I'm really excited to introduce to you today Cole Agar, who is the Director of Graduate and International Programs at the School of Transnational Law at Peking University in Shenzhen. Today we're going to talk about the career opportunities for international lawyers in China. Hi, Cole. So, can you tell me what attracted you to China originally?
Sure. So first off, I don't know, for me, good afternoon. I think for you, good evening, Richard. It's always great to talk with you. In terms of what attracted me to kind of moving my career to China, I think it's really what drives probably a lot of people around the world right now to look at China. Kind of just this fascinating world of opportunity. Right? There's so much going on in China. It's moving so fast. It's developing so fast. And I'll be blunt, like I was pretty ignorant about a lot of what was going on in China. But as a lawyer who worked in international dispute resolution and international commercial law, the opportunity to actually put myself on the ground in China, see for myself what was going on, have some firsthand knowledge of China rather than going off of what the American media might tell me or BBC might tell me. It was just a fascinating opportunity. And I've loved it. It's been great.
Yeah, what do you think about the legal field in China? Like, how is it at the moment? Like, how is it developing? And as like a foreigner, what's it like?
I mean, I think like everything else in China, it's growing and evolving fast. So, I think if you read some of the old, and by old in China terms, like, 10, 20 years ago, literature about doing business in China, mergers and acquisitions, this type of thing, they describe maybe some common trends about, oh, you have these huge teams and nobody really speaks English and you don't know who to talk to. Like there's a lot of these like common threads. And when I talk to, our students today, practitioners today, it's it's evolved so fast since then. And I think in so many ways has caught up, and in other ways even now is starting to surpass parts of the legal market in the US, in the UK, in Europe. And so like just as some interesting examples of that, there was just an article out of, I want to say it was like Washington Post or New York Times or one of those, about how a lot of the big international firms that were historically kind of their foot in Asia was like downtown Hong Kong, that now a lot of those firms have actually been pushed out by the big Chinese firms. So now you maybe have, I don't know, DLA Piper, Baker McKenzie moving to like slightly cheaper outer lying areas of Hong Kong to set up their offices, because the competition from these huge, mainland Chinese companies, law firms, has displaced them. Or like in another similar, I mean, this is another one I find really fascinating, but for, I don't know, I think for most of my lifetime, the main movement internationally between top lawyers around the world, right? Partners and maybe senior associates wanting to get promoted to partner, was typically between US and UK law firms. Now, apparently, it's actually from Western law firms to Chinese law firms. That's sort of the biggest movement in those top lawyers is actually to China, or to Chinese-owned law firms, which I think, it shows how much the legal profession is growing in China, but also how much it is internationalizing, right? I mean, the kind of the growing appetite for international business lawyers, transactional lawyers, venture capital lawyers, dispute resolution lawyers, is really growing, a lot.
And so, like, how does it look like as an American in that situation? Like, how is the law between, like, how does it differ between US and China?
I think it's a really complicated question. You know, I mean, okay, without like giving a dissertation defense on it, I think on the one hand, if you look in terms of like, you know, the fundamental sort of, you know, dogmatic basics, it's extremely different, right? I mean, it's common law versus civil law in China. It's, you know, Western law versus Eastern law, kind of whatever, you know, civil law with Chinese elements. And I think on that level, it, you know, it's sort of polar opposites. But I think on the other hand, in terms of like the practice of law, I think it's becoming more and more similar. I mean, it's, you know, the top law firms in any of the, you know, kind of the top tier cities in China, I think the experience of a kind of you know, a Peking University graduate or a Tsinghua graduate working at one of those top law firms in China is probably going to be more similar to a, you know, an American or a European graduate at a top law firm in the West than it is going to be to like a small town lawyer in China.
Mm.
So I mean, I think at that level, the profession is kind of merging or becoming, you know, more, I don't know, more similar.
And what do you think the opportunities are for a lawyer in like an American lawyer or a Western lawyer in China? Like kind of job opportunities and in careers?
Sure. I mean, so it's I would say it's improving, but not without obstacles. And maybe we can go into some of the obstacles in a second. But you know, one of the biggest obstacles that a lot of people think about is, you know, can I become bar certified, right? So a lot of people do LLMs in the US because it's a path to becoming bar certified. The difference in terms of opportunities in China is a foreign lawyer cannot become bar certified. It's not allowed. But there's a lot of legal careers that a foreign lawyer can do, like an American lawyer, where you don't have to be bar certified. So, you know, the main thing for being bar certified is that's what you would need to practice Chinese law and to represent clients in Chinese court. Um, but that's not what, you know, that's not really what any foreign lawyer is going to be doing anyways. So what they can do and what they have, you know, probably the expertise and the interest in doing are things like, you know, international dispute resolution, transactional law. So things like, you know, commercial law, international business, you know, venture capital, maybe advising on some like IP issues. They couldn't necessarily do IP litigation in China, but they could probably be advising on like the higher level, or advising, you know, a Chinese firm or a Chinese company on IP issues in countries that that company is expanding into. Um, so, I mean, frankly, in terms of the types of work that a foreign lawyer can do in China, it's it's frankly most quite a lot of what a foreign lawyer could do in any other country. Um, and and yeah, I mean, those opportunities are definitely expanding quite a lot. Um, I was going to say, if you're curious to see, um, I would throw up quick just like an example of some of our recent LLMs work placement that they've had either as like internships during our program or positions after our program.
Mm.
Um, so I'll just show you quick because I think it's interesting and it sort of it shows what I was just saying. So um, you know, the first thing I'd say is in, you know, for us, maybe in our earlier days, most of our graduates seem to want to come to China, maybe have an interesting experience and head home again. That's still probably the case for about half of our graduates, maybe. But more and more, we're seeing graduates that one of their big priorities is spending some time on the ground, gaining work experience in China, with maybe the goal of either staying in China or returning then to their home country, but with the contacts, with the network, either business or legal, to maybe go to a law firm in their home country and bring some clients with them, or go to a law firm back in their home country and work for the China desk. So, at this point, we've had, we've had our graduates geographically in Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing. I think we have one in Guangzhou right now. And I'd say the main areas they've been at are either kind of international law firms that have offices in China, or Chinese law firms that are kind of spreading internationally or have merged maybe with foreign law firms, or in-house counsel at some of like the Chinese tech companies, some of these Chinese companies that are really growing and spreading to other countries. But we've also, for example, we had one student or graduate who worked as like legal counsel to an embassy in Shanghai. And then we've had quite a few who will go back to their home country, as I mentioned, and work in sort of China related fields, or maybe, they work for a company that has, or a firm that has offices in China and in the US, or, in China and in, Germany or Latin America. And they'll act as sort of a bridge lawyer between those two sets of offices.
That's great. I'd like to ask more about the program, but I have a few other questions about China. So, do you think to have these opportunities in China, do you need to speak Chinese?
Yeah, so I mentioned, that there are still barriers. And I would say what I hear from our career services office, our current students, our graduates, is that probably one of the most sought after skills in a graduate student or an alumni, is being able to speak Chinese. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's always a barrier. Most of our graduates do not, most of our foreign graduates do not speak Chinese, at least not at a professional level. But if you're, I'd say if you're wanting to have a longer term career in China, it's definitely going to be harder to get maybe some of the top opportunities if you don't speak Chinese. It doesn't necessarily mean you won't, right? Again, there are foreign partners at Chinese law firms who do not speak Chinese. But if you're coming in maybe as a fresh graduate, Chinese is a pretty sought after skill. Now, again, that is changing as these firms and these companies become more international. We had one of our recent graduates who ended up working for maybe about a year with a tech company out of Beijing who is expanding into the Latin American market. He had a little Chinese, but for them, what was more important is that he spoke Spanish, and that he had grounding in one of the major jurisdictions in Latin America. We have a recent graduate from Uganda who, again, kind of had some, little bit of basic Chinese, but for the law firm that he's working with, what they really wanted was that he was from a major common law jurisdiction in Africa. So for them, the fact that he was Ugandan and had, previous work experience was more important than whether or not he spoke Chinese. But it's definitely, speaking Chinese is definitely still a very valuable skill, whether you stay in China or go back, to your home country.
Yeah, what I'm saying is in many industries, the most of the career opportunities are in places where, as a foreigner, you have an advantage compared to Chinese people. So, for example, like helping all of the companies that are expanding out around the world, and you can give them access to your market, or then you can help them to expand internationally, which may be hard for people from China to do, and it's very hard to compete against so many graduates in China in those kind of markets because they can speak English and Chinese perfectly.
Yeah, that's sort of especially, for example, for the Chinese students coming out of our School of Transnational Law, they have done a full curriculum in English and a full curriculum in Chinese. So they're not just, verbally proficient in English. They have studied for 3 years in English, the same cases that students are studying in the US. So yeah, I mean, I think it can be hard, especially if you're trying to get into like one of the top law firms to compete against some of those graduates, if you don't speak Chinese. But again, I mean, at least what we've seen from our graduates, those who have wanted to get some work experience in China have had a pretty good success rate in doing that. I mean, actually a quite good success rate in doing that. And I think, part of it is at the end of the day, anyone who's being kind of honest with themselves or honest with an applicant or a student, whatever, you're not going to be a foreign student and ever become a completely proficient Chinese lawyer. It's just, it's almost never going to happen. And I don't think anyone's really expecting it to happen. What I think is often more valuable and where, like the types of graduates who come out of our program, kind of where they find their niche, is as lawyers who have kind of a foothold in China and then grounding in another country. And I think part of the reason for that is I mean, again, kind of one of the things going back to what attracted me to China is from the outside, it's just like, it's a hard country to get kind of your head around. It's a hard country to feel like you really understand it or have contacts or connections if you haven't put in the time to actually like study there or work there. So I think, for graduates of maybe any LLM program in China, the opportunity to go back to your home country, but with that experience, is something that can be really valuable to a law firm or a company back in your home country. Because even if you can't, even if you are not a 100% proficient Chinese lawyer, which you're almost for sure not going to be, having the contacts in China, having having on WeChat someone who's an up and rising lawyer at one of the big law firms in China, or who's in-house counsel at Huawei and was also a friend of yours when you were, studying in China. Those sorts of connections and kind of understanding, maybe like, I don't know, to go even maybe a little bit higher, like kind of that respect for the Chinese legal industry, Chinese business development, is something that can go a long way, back in your home country or, for some international organization. And there's just, until now, there are not that many foreign lawyers who have that kind of experience on the ground in China.
So it's going to be a very important skill set as China continues to grow internationally. Absolutely. And the economy grows. How do most of the students find those careers that you see? How do the international lawyers find those opportunities?
Sure. So I mean, there's a mix of ways. I would say, one thing that's great about a program like ours, and I expect, other law schools have maybe a similar office, although I'm not sure. But we have a dedicated career and student services office, under the management of one of our deans. And its express purpose is to, find placement opportunities for students, whether that is organizing on-campus interviews, doing kind of career panels with potential employers, doing kind of soft skills workshops and that sort of thing. Or sometimes just, a student having a one-on-one meeting with our Dean of Career Services so that student is on his radar. So if he sees maybe an interesting opportunity come along, he knows, okay, here's a student maybe that I can forward it to. Some of it comes from just being in the network. Even though I am not currently practicing as an attorney, right? I'm working at the university. It's not uncommon that I will have maybe a headhunter or, kind of one of these agencies contact me and say, hey, based on your profile, we're looking for someone to interview for a position in Beijing or Guangzhou, and I say, I'm not interested right now, but I have some really great graduate students who I can recommend to you. And so I think part of it is just being in China where you're closer to those jobs, you're starting to tap into a network that can move maybe some of those leads your direction, is another thing that can help a lot. It's, I think it's in any competitive market, whether it's, China or DC or New York, it can be hard to really get into the market from the outside. And just the advantage of kind of physically putting yourself there, so that if a partner from a law firm in Hong Kong says, oh, your profile's really interesting, I see that you're studying at Peking University, you want to meet up for lunch next week, you can sort of casually, before the pandemic, you could sort of casually say, yeah, I'll take the train there, how about next Tuesday? And the ability to do, those sorts of like professional kind of networking connections, that's another way that certainly a lot of our graduates can end up getting jobs. And of course, sometimes it's through professors or through, maybe an alumni of the school or a fellow student. All those different connections and parts of your network are definitely something that can help a lot.
Yeah, because actually I know that the brand and the network of Peking University is very powerful. So actually because I originally was studying at Peking University, and I remember telling people, as I was traveling, I was talking to people, and then I would say like, oh yeah, I'm studying at Peking University, and they would just be like, whoa, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then it just opens a lot of doors as well, like meeting people and then meeting alumni who've studied there as well. It's amazing to have that behind you in China.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a strong brand, and it's always great when like on top of a good program, you can also have a strong brand like that. I'll hear from, maybe one of our alumni in somewhere like Chile or Argentina, right, which is about as far on the opposite side of the world as you can get from China. But they'll go into a meeting maybe with a client, and it turns out the client is it's a Chinese client, and the moment that the Chinese client finds out that this Chilean lawyer went to Peking University, it's like a kind of an instant credibility reference, right? I mean, it's an impressive thing for maybe you're right, a company CEO or in-house counsel attorney to see that on the resume of a lawyer in the West.
Yeah, it's a huge mark of quality, isn't it? Yeah, can you tell me, because the program is in Shenzhen, and what is it like to study in Shenzhen, and how does it differ from in Beijing?
Sure. I mean, the biggest difference in terms of the curriculum, well, I should start by saying both programs are great. I mean, both our LLM programs, whether in Beijing or our Shenzhen graduate campus, are really interesting programs. The main difference in terms of content is the Beijing program is specifically focused on Chinese law, whereas our program at our School of Transnational Law in Shenzhen is a broader curriculum and a more flexible curriculum that combines Chinese law, American common law, EU law, kind of international law, and frankly more, right? I mean, there's other moot court and kind of soft skills training and contract drafting and cross-cultural mergers and acquisitions, and kind of all these types of courses that you can take. And it's much more built around elective courses. So a student in our program doesn't have to pick a kind of a specific track that they then follow throughout. If they want to take a sampling of intellectual property law and international corporate law, because that's what they see being important to their career. They're free to do that. They can kind of pick and choose the courses to customize their personal curriculum to fit whatever their interests are. The other maybe kind of a big difference in terms of like the class makeup is unlike really most, I think maybe just about any other program in China, and frankly, different than many other LLM programs around the world, we don't put all of our LLM students into a pod of internationals. Our international students are side by side with our Chinese students in basically any class they take. And the reason that we kind of have the fortune to be able to do that is our school was built from the ground up with English as a primary language of instruction. So it's not that we're creating special English language classes for LLM students. It's that more than half the classes at the law school are already in English, and those are the same classes that all of our Chinese students are taking. And this is another thing that I think is just a great feature of our program, kind of in particular, which is that, as we talked a bit about, one of the big things if you're looking to get a career in China or related to China is having the network that you can build during your time in China. And the fact that we're not keeping international students isolated, but instead they are, living and studying side by side with all their Chinese classmates all the time is something that can really help to just build those friendships, build that network. Otherwise, in terms of maybe the last thing difference, which is like, on the one hand, like very simple, but also different, is just like physical geographical location, right? Even though both campuses are part of Peking University, our Beijing campus and our Shenzhen graduate school campus are halfway across the country apart from each other. So, we're located right next to Hong Kong, which is another one of the fantastic cities in China. Shenzhen itself has a very different spirit from Beijing. Of course, Beijing is much older, much more historical. If I'm going to be blunt, Beijing is better if you're interested in tourism. It's the political capital of China. Shenzhen is much more the tech and innovation scene of China. It's a great city to live in. I think it's very comfortable. Here I can, for anyone who's not that familiar with Shenzhen, I'll throw up a couple of pictures just because I think it's really impressive kind of what Shenzhen has become today. So just to like throw it out there. So this is Shenzhen in 1979. People love showing the comparison of these two pictures. This is that same skyline from 30 years later. And it's just like wild that the only thing that is the same is that line of mountains in the background. So, today Shenzhen is this like huge tech hub. Things are changing every year. New parts of the city are getting remodeled. It's a city that's really trying to like prove itself internationally. So you'll find, there's a big jazz festival here. There's an international marathon that I usually run each year. There's just like a lot of fun stuff like that. There's the big, if you're familiar, I assume, with DJI, the drone company. They sponsor and organize a huge event every year that's kind of like a battle bots, robot wars, robotics competition that takes place in Shenzhen every year. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that. But it's definitely, it's not a, tourist hub, like some of the more historic cities in China, like Shanghai or Beijing.
Yeah, that's cool. I've been to Shenzhen a few times, and it's amazing, the environment, and you have like you have beaches, and you can go to Hong Kong for easily, and it's really nice environment, and it's exciting having all those companies around as well, and like the speed of development.
Yeah, real kind of like tech and innovation hub. Like we've had some of our graduates working at, you know, AI companies or robotics companies, maybe doing an internship or like some legal advising. So yeah, that's it's a cool feature.
And the climate is quite nice as well. So
the pollution is also much better than Beijing or Shanghai, which is an upside.
Yeah, I think I was saying that Beijing has got a lot better, and then we had a sandstorm the other day. Yeah, so I have a question about the students that you look for the students that can apply for the program, and what kind of students are the perfect students to apply for the program.
That's maybe
something about admissions.
Sure. I mean, it's a complicated question in that in a second, I will describe one example of like a perfect student in our program. But before I'd say that, what I'd say is actually one of the things that has been quite fascinating to see with the students that we attract is it is every type of student from every corner of the globe. And that's not an exaggeration, right? There's a lot of programs, not just in China, but around the world, that will tend to have mostly a regional draw. And we are definitely, you know, in terms of our international students, not a regionally focused program in terms of who we get. And I think a big part of that is just China is becoming such a uniquely attractive place around the world that, you know, almost every year in recent years, we have had a few students that we bring into our incoming class from every continent other than Antarctica, and in pretty equal proportions. Sort of the profile of what maybe attracts a student changes a little bit, right? Maybe regional students are more attracted by the kind of prestigious name of Peking University. Maybe European students are more attracted by China being a little bit more novel or exotic or different than what their friends are doing. You know, maybe students from Latin America or, you know, parts of Africa or Eastern Europe, maybe the attraction for them is more like the career opportunities that, you know, China's Belt and Road Initiative and China's increasing investment in their countries can bring. So that aspect is a little bit different, but almost everywhere in the world has some reason why coming and studying in China and maybe in particular at Peking University is very attractive. You know, for us, the kind of our ideal student is someone who mixes, you know, kind of no surprise here, but like strong academics, you know, some like work experience or extracurricular activities. And then the final kind of like it factor is that they have some actual compelling reason for why they want to study in China, right? Why China fits into their career trajectory. So an example of that is, you know, we have a really fantastic applicant, incoming student this year. He's from Argentina. He's been working at a law firm for, you know, maybe 5 years or so. Has been, you know, he's already proficient in Chinese. He's kind of a managing level associate at his law firm in Argentina. Just finished his LLM at Columbia in the United States, which gave him kind of the common law US connections. But for him, his goal is, you know, in the next few years to move into potentially being the lawyer at his law firm, leading the China desk, right? Argentina, like so many areas, has just an insane amount of growing investment from China. And so again, what you see in Argentina, like many other countries, is that top law firms are having a designated China desk or Asia desk to handle those cases. And so for him, coming and spending maybe a year, 2 years based in China, one, will get his Chinese proficiency to the next level, his kind of legal Chinese to the next level, and two, will give him that grounding and the network to then go back to his home country and move into a kind of leadership position at his law firm and kind of take over the China desk. So for us, right, I mean, work experience, strong academics, and a very compelling reason for why he wants to study in our program and why studying in our program is going to, improve his career, and in a way that, if I'm being blunt, like be the type of alumni that we want to have, right? It's great to have a leading lawyer in a country like Argentina who will have associates then maybe training under him. Having a lawyer like that be an alumni of our university, have connections with our professors, have fond memories of the time that he spent in China. That's an example of one of our ideal students.
Cool, that's great. Yeah, also it's very helpful for the whole community, isn't it, to have this network of quality students around the world. So that's great, Cole. It's been great to talk to you. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say to students? Or?
At risk of going on at more length than I already have, I think the final thing I would just say is kind of what I started off by maybe saying from my own personal experience, which is just there are so many interesting opportunities in China today. The value of studying in China, whether it's in the legal field or any other field, right? Computer science or history, kind of you name it. The value of spending time in China is higher today than it has ever been. And if you haven't thought about studying in China before, you should think about it. And if you've already been thinking about it, you should take the next step, apply to a program in China. It's likely to be the type of experience that will transform your career and possibly be like a pivotal moment in your life. It won't be easy. There will be things that you will struggle with, and that is half the journey. But in the end, it will be well worth it, and you will have a fantastic experience.
Cool, thank you, Cole. So we'll put the link to the program in more detail underneath the video, and it's been great to talk, and we'll look forward to keeping in contact.
Sure, always a pleasure.
And cool, cheers, Cole. Talk to you later.